Alright, so then in this video, what I want to go through is the data visualization process. And this is probably the most complex part of this project, of actually anonymizing and visualizing the data properly. So like this is what I'm talking about, right? Like these summaries, the charts, the maps, all that kind of stuff. Okay, so how do we do this? Well, first, if we go to the Airtable dashboard, you'll notice that I have two versions of the PPE shortage database. There is this private final and there is a public version. So why do I have two versions? The reason I have two versions is because any sort of data visualization process, if you want to ever embed any of these blocks onto a website, that inevitably makes all the data in this database public. So to show you what I mean, if we go to the Dare to Care packages website, if you go to any of these blocks and you click Show Data, you'll see, well, let's make this bigger. So if we make it bigger, we click Show Data. You'll see that all of this information is now visible in the front end. And that's going to cause some problems, obviously, because you can't have email addresses, phone numbers, or any other personally identifiable information on the front end. So we need to anonymize the data. Well, how do we do that? Basically, if all of this information is going to be public, then we just have to make sure that the base where there is a block located does not have any sensitive information in it whatsoever. Well, how on earth do we do that? Well, if we go to the private final, this is where actually the data from the submission form is coming in. This is where the hospitals and GPs and care homes are filling out their information. Now, what we do is we use a tool called Integromat. And what we do with Integromat is we make it so that every time somebody creates a new submission, like they insert a new row, that row is automatically recreated on this public version of the database. Except there is, like, we remove all of this like email field, we remove all of the address field, the postcode field, the mobile number field. So it's a matter of mapping the data from one base to the other base, from the private base to the public base. And if you're wondering why there are two columns with name in the private version of this, the reason is because we're taking the abbreviated name, so for instance, Tanya, and we're mapping that to Tanya, to this name. So we're taking the abbreviated name, and just going back into the first video where we talked about the databases, this was the formula to take the name and then just take the first word. So essentially just have the first name. Mercy, Eleanor, it removes the last name. So that's how you do that. Right, so what I have open here is a SaaS product called Integromat. And it's a very useful way of linking together various cloud tools to automate the passing of data. So I created a scenario called the anonymization of PPE data. And what happens is it watches any new submissions in that private form I was talking about, and it passes those submissions to the public form. So Integromat itself is it's a tool that's got its kind of own language and things. So I'm not going to give a full tutorial about Integromat here because that's not feasible. But I'll show you the how I set this up so that when you look into Integromat yourself, you'll be able to see the things that I am mapping. So basically, this is a trigger scenario. Here are my settings for it. Here is the creation of the new row in the public database. And here are my settings for that. So just the things that I want you to notice is the name. This is for the public field, right? Name. It's matched to abbreviated name. Abbreviated name is from the private field. GP or hospital is just GP or hospital is just GP. This one, GP or hospital. So it's a direct match. And essentially, I'm matching all of these things. So if we scroll down, you can see my settings. And I'm just passing the exact same data from one base to the other base, with the exception of name becoming abbreviated name. Abbreviated name becoming name. So we scroll down, we see all the settings, and this is what it looks like. Okay, so now that you have that automation scenario set up, what we have to do is create the blocks on the public version of the database, right? Not the private one, because then all the blocks, if you embed them on any website, will become publicly viewable. So to create the block, all you do is you click this blocks thing in the top right corner and scroll down. Like there should be some sort of like install a block button. You click it and you choose the block that you want. Blocks are essentially Airtable's ways of visualizing data. So there's a variety of possible choices. It's not just summary fields or bar charts or pie charts. There's like organization charts. There's page designers where you can have a page that follows a template so that all your records are following that template as well. Gantt charts. There's a variety of things. But the thing that we want is summary. So go to summary, click install, and you'll notice that this asks me which dashboard I'd like to add it to. I'll show you what this means in a sec, but let's just say numbers. Right, so now there's something added to the numbers. I'll edit this in a bit, but the dashboard is just, there's multiple dashboards. You just kind of categorize the data that you want in certain areas. You can add a dashboard if you want. This is dashboard 3, and then now there's a new dashboard. Let me just delete this. Right, so if we go back to the numbers dashboard, the new block that we added is 340. So that means absolutely nothing. Now, if we edit it, so so let's just let's edit the block. So settings, and then this is the table that we're looking at. There's only one table: hospitals requesting masks / PPE, right? Hospitals requesting masks / PPE. And the view we're looking at is just, we're going to keep it as the grid view. And the grid view is just this default view that we have all the data in. So we do that. And then, okay, what are we summarizing? Well, let's say we want to know the total quantity of visors requested. So what we can do, this is a count. And what a count is just a count of the total number of records here. So you can see there's 340 records, right? But that's not that useful for us. We want a summary of just the visors. So it's a summary, and then you pick a field. What's the thing you wanted to summarize? Well, let's say visors quantity. And then summary type, well, what kind of summary do you want? Do you want a sum? Do you want the average? Do you want the standard deviation? These are just all different statistical terminologies for summarizing something. Well, let's just go with sum. So 24115. That is the total number of visors. So let's just name it something. Total number of visors requested. And you can change the colors and things like that if you want, but let's just leave it as blue. Click done. And there you go. And you can rename this just total number of visors requested. So you'll see that this is visors, this is visors. And you just do the exact same thing with all of the different other types of PPE items. So I'm going to scroll down. I'm going to delete this because I don't want to mess up the actual database. So let's just delete that. The only thing I want to draw your attention to is this one, right? Total quantity of PPE demanded. How did we do that? Well, this is a summary of this column. If you will recall, in the earlier videos, we made a new column with a formula field, and the formula looks like this. So you can pause the screen and take a look for a second. But it's essentially the summary of all of the PPE requests in a particular row. So if we go to this row, like if you just look at this one, 300 gloves plus 250 FFP2 masks equals 550, right? Equals 550. So that's a formula to do it. And then all this is just a summary of this column. So if we go to the settings, total PPE demanded is a sum of total PPE quantity demanded, and we just named it whatever we want. So that's how you do the numbers blocks. And then if you want to do the blocks for the charts, well, just make a new dashboard, name it charts. I've already done that, so we're just going to go to this dashboard. And one thing that's particularly useful is this chart over here, which has the most requested items in terms of frequency. So visors, it was requested 163 times. Masks, 159 times. 130 times for FFP2 masks. So this is just a gauge of the relative popularity of different types of PPE items. So this is not absolute quantity, right? This is a request by frequency. So it's just a different way of measuring popularity. And to do this, well, the procedure is the same as before. Just install a block. This one, you're going to want the chart block. So click that, click install. Let's put in the charts dashboard. Click add block. And there you go. You have a chart. And then you can choose between a variety of chart types. So this one, let's say we want the pie chart, right? And okay, what are we actually summarizing? Well, let's just go back here, and I'm going to delete this chart I made in a second. If we go here, the settings we chose for this are, well, it's a pie chart, and we're summarizing this what items do you need field, which is what items do you need, right, which is this one, right? And it's essentially a count of how many times that each of these PPE item requests are showing up in the entire database. So what items do you need? And what this, so we're doing a count, right? It's a count of the total number of times that it shows up. And what this button does, the split multiple values, is if we don't have this, the whole thing wouldn't work. But if we do have it, it works. And the reason for this is if we don't split the multiple values, then like the Airtable doesn't see FFP2 masks as its own entity. And it won't create a nice little pie slice with just FFP2 masks. Instead, how it'll see the entity is, it'll see gloves, FFP2 masks. That's one entity, right? FFP2 masks, N95 masks, visors. That's another entity. So all of these combinations of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, of the 9 PPE items that you have in the database, all of the combinations would be its own slice in the pie chart. And that's why when you click this, it says you can't show more than 25 slices because like there's just so many of these combinations. This is one combination because it's just one thing, right? This is another combination because it's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These 5 particular PPE items. So there's way more than 25, and the pie chart doesn't make any sense when you do it like that. Okay, so that's how we made the pie chart. These things are actually quite irrelevant, so I'm not going to go through these. We don't actually use them anymore. This was initially just a gauge of the frequency of, sorry, not the frequency, like the absolute quantity requested, broken down into different chunks. Like, somebody wanted 1 to 50 N95 masks. Somebody wanted 50 to 100 N95 masks. And it was just a way of gauging what types of items were like the total number of items that were requested most frequently. And you'll notice that there's a pattern here, right? Like if you scroll down, you look at this bar chart, you'll see that there is quite a bit of clustering in the bottom distribution of these bar charts. Or in other words, there's a lot of people wanting 1 to 50 N95 masks. They want like few quantities. Okay, so that's the pie chart. Now there's 2 other blocks I want to show you. And first, it's this 340, which is the total number of hospitals/GPs this data is based on. Or in other words, it's just the count of how big your sample is, how many respondents there were. And the settings for that is just, it's just count. It's just a count of how many records there are. So that's the setting for that. And then the other important one is, so let me just delete this chart from earlier because we did not actually need this. So let me just delete that. And the other one is just this display of when the data was last updated, so we can see exactly how up to date this is. And what this is just a summary field of the field submitted time. So if we go to the submitted time field, this is a created time type of data, which is just a way of Airtable tracking when this submission came in, right? Like this one came in June 12th, this one came in June 8th, and you'll notice that this cannot be edited. So like this data is not really fudgeable. It's going to be exactly when it was actually submitted. So again, here are the settings for that. And yeah, okay, so there you go. And the final thing to do is now we have to look at the maps dashboard. And I'll show you how to visualize the shortage data based on geography. So maps is just another block. You basically click install a block. The type of block you want is a map. You click install, and you're going to have this thing pop up. And this is essentially a way of linking up your Airtable database's geographical information with the Google Maps API, which will identify in real time when there's new submissions coming in, where the bubbles are actually placed. So I'm not going to do this for you, but like the step-by-step process is very straightforward here. Just follow exactly the steps that it's asking you to do. And then once that's done, you'll get an API key and you'll paste it here and you'll click save, and then you'll go next to next to next. And then once you do that, this is what the settings page will look like. So let me just make this full screen. So essentially, if you look on the right-hand side, the relevant fields you have to look at are two of them. The first is location. And what this is it's what is the field that Google Maps is using to decide where to paste these markers. And in our case, it's postcode. So postcode, right? And if we go to the database, I have these blurred so you can't really see it, but like postcode, you'll have all the postcodes here. And these are the things that determine where the marker should be placed. So that's one, postcode. And then the second one to look at is this one, Geo Code Cache. And essentially, this is just a way of recognizing whether or not the marker was placed successfully. And you'll have to create a new column, just name it geocode or whatever you want to name it. And then when you choose that in the settings page, so over here, when you choose geocode, what will happen is that Airtable will write this very long kind of like encrypted code, and the blue represents that this postcode was placed correctly, and the red represents it was not. So you'll see that all of these are blue, except this red one, which was just a test. And you can see that the postcode is gibberish, right? It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So it's not a real postcode. So that's why it's red. And then everything down here is just a matter of aesthetics. You can choose what color you want all the markers to be. You can choose the visuals of the marker. And then the marker size is a way of choosing how big the marker is dependent on something else. So in this case, the marker size is dependent on gloves quantity because, this should be aprons quantity. It should be aprons quantity, right? Because this one is actually about aprons demanded. So once we have that, the more aprons requested, the bigger the bubble will be. So that's how that's done. And then you'll see, like, for example, there's more aprons demanded here than there are aprons demanded here.